Welcome back to the Farm Show here on Westplex Talk 1045 FM. We are listening to select highlights from the Corteva Q4 2025 earnings call. You say, John, that sounds like a lot of math or numbers. Not really. Corteva's got a lot of news about what their company transactions and spinoffs will mean for growers going forward. And a lot of the information is of interest to investors. This is the best time to point out, as we did in our last segment, that nothing you hear here is financial advice, and all the information from the Corteva call is presented for information and entertainment purposes only. Now let's get back to the Corteva call. Chuck Magro, the CEO, went on to expand on what that Bayer licensing deal means specifically to the seed portfolio. Have a listen.
The acceleration that this agreement gives us is pretty powerful. When we were thinking about our original royalty journey, we were really talking about soybeans and then corn starting in late next decade. And now we're talking about corn starting now, basically in 2027, and then the introduction of cotton now. So when you put all that together, I think that what you're going to see is that we've really put our licensing business in a much higher gear than what we could have done absence of clarity around this comprehensive agreement. So, we'll have to go back and we'll look at the numbers, but the acceleration from a freedom to operate is real, and it's pulling our corn in many cases many years ahead, and it's also opening up the door on cotton. I think the other thing is this does not contemplate wheat. So if you start thinking about that, and we've said that our hybrid wheat opportunity combined with our branded business and our licensing opportunity would be $1 billion of revenue. So when you start thinking about this strategically as Corteva and then soon to be SpinCo, this provides a huge amount of value creation for our shareholders. The licensing opportunities continue to grow, and as Judd mentioned, even today we have more demand than we have supply. So this was a matter of clearing up the access to the freedom to operate, and now that we have that, we can set our R&D and our commercial teams to meet the growing demand that we have for soybeans, for cotton, for corn, and soon to be wheat.
From there, Kevin McCarthy of Vertical Research asked about gene-edited products and what that regulatory framework will look like, particularly in Europe. Kevin also asked about multi-disease resistance in corn. Here's what Chuck had to say.
If you step back and you look at the global regulatory framework, we're seeing very good progress on support for gene editing around the world. In fact, most of the major producing countries now have policies firmly in place. To your question with the EU, in December there was an agreement with an EU framework. It still needs to be formally adopted by Parliament and the Council, and we are expecting that hopefully soon, I'd say by the first half of this year. And we are very supportive of what we've seen so far. We think it's science-based. We think that it's going to be quite practical, and it's going to allow us to bring much better crop technology to European farmers and really help, I think, the EU from a overall food security and self-sufficiency perspective. And in the regulatory framework that is being proposed, I think we'll have some areas where it'll actually be a simplified process, which will allow us to get, I think, products to market a lot more quickly. Now, we still need China approval. It's probably one of the last remaining significant import markets that we need approval, and we're very hopeful that we'll get that soon. If you think about gene editing, and you've heard me talk about this before, there's probably no more important technology right now that we can bring to market to help farmers. And if you start thinking about how thin farmers' margins are right now, this technology can go a lot way to helping farmers improve their profitability. Now, to your second question around our products, so that's right. We have a gene-edited fungal disease-resistant corn hybrid. We call it a disease super locus. And I've seen the test plots. It continues to look fantastic in our test fields. And we will be able to bring that to the market most likely within a year or two after receiving our overall regulatory approvals. And we're pretty excited about that. We'll first bring it to the U.S. market, but then we'll quickly move that technology around the world.
That's right, Chuck. You tell them America first when it comes to multiple disease-resistant corn. Then it was David Begleiter from Deutsche Bank. David asked what's on everybody's mind. What's the state of the farm economy today, and how does it manifest? That was David's word. That's a Deutsche Bank type word, isn't it? Manifest. How does it manifest for farmers' spending habits this year? Chuck had Judd speak from the seed side, and then Robert King, who's the executive vice president of the crop protection side, speak.
Yes, thanks for the question. Our order books are, very strong at this point in time. Our prepay that we've collected is on par with prior year, and our cash credit mix is very, very similar, plus or minus a point or two. So we feel really good about the position we're in. I guess translation may be what's your guess on corn acres? I'd say it's February. There's still snow on the ground, and that corn versus soy mix, it's going to shift a little bit. There'd be a little bit of weight towards, some more soy acres in space of corn. It's all very well manageable and within the guide that we've provided. So, but feel really good about the start to the year, both with our direct Pioneer as well as our Brevant retail brands.
David, it's Robert for crop protection. Very similar story. Very strong order books across the Northern Hemisphere. Europe is in full swing, and North America is moving. As we look into January, we're having a strong movement now. And keep in mind, both of these markets this last year, grew a few tenths, and that momentum continues as we're moving forward here. So.
There were a few other questions from analysts, mostly focused on the financial numbers, and we can skip over those type of questions and answers there. We'll move to a question from Aleksey Yefremov from KeyBanc Capital Markets. He asked about Corteva's crop protection portfolio, particularly generics versus branded products, and he noted that the financial results, as reported by Corteva, seem to be diverging between the two, generics and branded products. Robert King, who leads up crop protection, handled that question.
We will remain about flat to with what we've been in the past. Keep in mind, we're about 2/3 differentiated on our overall portfolio now, getting good growth out of our new products and biologicals. But we don't have any major shifts coming off patent. Like in the industry, there are some big molecules coming off, but we don't play in those markets. So we should be stable, much like you've seen this past year from a portfolio standpoint. I would keep in mind that there's a few things coming to play, though, that are going to help us out a little bit more. And we're waiting on registration, but we hope to have a Visa launch latter part of this year, which will augment that differentiated portfolio. And remember, this is a fungicide that attacks Asian soybean rust, and we're expecting big things out of that molecule as we move forward.
A little bit later in the queue came Matt DeYoe of Bank of America, and he asked about the expansion but beyond corn and soybeans, cotton and wheat. What are the priorities?
Yeah, Matt, let me give you a teaser, but I want you to join us in September when we do our investor day for both companies just prior to our separation. So I won't tell you the whole story, but look, I think from a seed perspective, we have a lot of opportunity in our core businesses. And, Judd just articulated a little bit here on this call. So we think there's room to grow in corn and soybeans. And with the agreement now that we have in place, the seed licensing business, I think, is going to be just a great growth platform for us going forward. I think then we've talked about cotton, so that's another new market for us. And we've already covered gene editing. I think gene editing, the capability, if we can provide differentiated technology from our innovation in gene editing, we will consider what I would consider to be tangential or adjacent crops. But we won't go there unless we believe we can provide something that is unique and special to the market. And right now, as we said, our short-term focus is seed licensing in cotton and corn and in soybeans, and then entering the hybrid wheat market. We're going to do that conventionally, but also with gene-edited hybrid wheat. And that market is the largest row crop market on the planet. 20% of our calories are still consumed there as humanity. And we've got lots of new technology coming in with our proprietary traits as well. So I think we've got a lot to keep our plates full right now. But with the advent of gene editing, and as we get more comfortable with the acceptance of the science around the world, which certainly looks to me like that's what's happening, it should open up other markets for us.
A bit later, Michael Sison from Wells Fargo pressed for more details about crop protection markets rebounding. Robert King tackled that one.
Let's talk about the CP markets for 2026. We expect to see modest growth in the overall CP market around the world this year. It'll be volume will continue to grow. There's going to be some pricing pressures against that. But by and large, we're seeing positive signs around the world. And, earlier question this morning about how things looking in Northern Hemisphere on the order books. And like I said, they're strong. So the year started really well from that standpoint. Specific to Brazil, when you think about pricing there and when do they stabilize, et cetera, a couple of things happening in Brazil. When you look at the overall market, there is ample supply of product coming in. And so that is a lot of more generics and formulated generics, but nevertheless, a lot of supply. But when you think about the differentiated products, we're still seeing a need for that technology, and farmers are demanding that. And keep in mind for us, again, 2/3 differentiated around the world. For us, those products command about a 10 to 15% higher margin than the rest of the portfolio. So yeah, we think there continues to be some pricing pressures there from some of the big molecules, but we have a good portfolio to combat that, and we think we're in a pretty good place from a business standpoint as we head into 2026.
All right, and the last analyst question that we'll run here is from Edlain Rodriguez with Mizhuno. He asked, would farmers see competitive prices from generics in North America? There was a lot of talk on the call about generic pressures in other parts of the world, but what about North America? Chuck Magro handled this question.
Yeah, Edlain, look, let me take a stab at that one. I think, look, the businesses, the markets are just fundamentally different. They're structurally built differently. The way the farmers buy, their channel partners, the infrastructure that's in each of the countries or the regions are different. And no market is immune to having generics, right? Generics have been part of the global CP market as long as I've been around and will always be, and they're in all the markets. I think that what's unique is what's happening in Brazil right now. And look, Brazil's going to grow, and there's more area going into production, as we've already said. But I think what we're seeing is that the channel is being a bit more responsible. It looks to us like the channel is functioning still relatively normally. There's a lot of product currently going to ground, but it is a well-supplied market because of the way that they allow their imports. Now, what we haven't talked about, I think, specific to Brazil, is a lot of this product is coming from China, and it looks to us like China may be taking early steps to control some of their exports. They just repealed their export VAT. So that's going to drive up the cost to export outside from China into Brazil. That we think is constructive for the market overall. We're starting to see M&A actually from some of the generics in China. I think that will be constructive overall. So I think that when you start thinking about this, we are comfortable that 2026, now I'm going to talk about globally, 2026, we should see some slow growth, which is a lot better than we've seen in the last 3 years. And 2025 was better than 24, right? It was a flat market driven by volume. But as Robert said, our planning assumption today is some headwinds when it comes to pricing in Brazil, but the rest of the markets, I think, are going to be quite healthy.
Okay, we'll leave it there with the analyst Q&A. We didn't cover all the questions there, again, because many of them were based on purely financial statistics that I think are superfluous to what most of us care about here. The overall separation timeline, as Corteva splits into two separate categories, two separate independent companies. In summary, in the first half of 2026, the new Corteva CEO will be named. And then that second company that they're referring to for now as SpinCo, it's kind of a generic term that all companies use when they're spinning companies off. SpinCo name and the brand identity will be launched here in the first half of 2026. Also, key executive leadership announcements will be made here in the first half of 2026. There's also a bunch of financial stuff that goes on in the first half of 2026. Form 10 filed with the SEC, credit agency reviews, yada, yada. In the second half of 2026 is when the rubber really meets the road. There's going to be an approval of the final capital structures for both companies. And then there will be investor day events and roadshows, likely in late Q3. There will be board of directors appointments. And then by the second half of 2026, the spinoff company, aka SpinCo, which will have a name and a brand identity by then, will be operating as a separate public company. The Investors Day event that Chuck referenced is likely to take place in September of that year. We're going to go ahead and head to break right now. When we come back, we'll be talking about another ag powerhouse, FMC. They had an earnings call this week, and they took a lot of people by surprise by revealing something that they hadn't talked about before. You're listening to The Farm Show on Westplex Talk 104.5 FM. We'll be back right after this.